Fiancée told me, "Your family drama isn't my problem," when my younger brother needed emergency help after a mental health crisis. She said I was being absolutely right to cut him off completely. 3 weeks later, her sister got arrested for embezzlement, and she came crying to me for emotional support. I looked her straight in the eyes and used her exact words back to her. Viewers, welcome to the channel. We are just starting and your support means a lot. If you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. My name is Tyler Matthews. I'm 29 years old, and I used to believe that the person you're planning to marry should be your partner through life's worst moments, not just the Instagram-worthy ones. Watching my fiancé dismiss my family's crisis with cold indifference to realize that some people only show their true character when compassion costs them something. I met Vanessa Pierce when she was 26, working as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup in Seattle. She was the kind of woman who seemed to have her life perfectly mapped out, with 5-year plans, color-coded calendars, and an answer for everything. I was immediately drawn to her confidence and the way she carried herself like she could handle anything the world threw at her. For 2 years, our relationship felt like something out of a romantic comedy. Vanessa was successful, ambitious, and had this way of making me feel like I was part of something bigger than myself. She introduced me to her world of networking events, weekend getaways to wine country, and dinner parties where everyone seemed to have their lives figured out. Coming from my blue-collar background, it felt like I was being elevated to a level I'd never imagined for myself. Vanessa's family seemed perfect too, at least on the surface. Parents, Robert and Linda Pierce, both 54, were successful professionals who lived in a beautiful house in Bellevue and took European vacations twice a year. Her younger sister, Jessica, 24, was finishing her MBA and already had a job lined up at a prestigious consulting firm. They were the kind of family that sent Christmas cards with professional photos and had matching outfits for family portraits. Family was different. My parents died in a car accident when I was 23, leaving me to look after my younger brother Owen, who was 19 at the time. Owen had always struggled with anxiety and depression, but losing our parents sent him into a spiral that took years of therapy, medication adjustments, and constant support to manage. The time I met Vanessa, Owen was 25 and doing better, working part-time at a bookstore and taking community college classes, but he still had bad days. I was always upfront with Vanessa about my family situation. I explained that Owen was my responsibility, that he sometimes needed extra support, and that my life couldn't be as spontaneous as hers because I had to be available if he needed me. He seemed to understand and even admired my dedication to my brother, calling it sweet and noble how I took care of him. The problem started small, so gradually that I didn't notice the pattern at first. When I had to cancel a dinner date because Owen was having a panic attack, Vanessa was understanding, but suggested maybe Owen needed to learn to handle these things on his own. When I spent a weekend helping Owen move to a new apartment instead of going to her friend's wedding, she was supportive but mentioned that it was important for us to have our own lives too. Vanessa had this way of framing her criticisms as concern for my well-being. "I just worry that you're enabling him," she'd say when I'd check in on Owen after a bad day. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone stand on their own 2 feet. She'd follow it up with something about how she was only saying this because she loved me and wanted what was best for both Owen and me. The gaslighting was subtle but persistent. When I'd mentioned that Owen was doing well in school or had gotten a promotion at the bookstore, Vanessa would respond with faint praise followed by concern. "That's great, but do you think he's really ready for that kind of responsibility?" Or, "I hope he doesn't get overwhelmed and have another setback." She had a way of turning every positive development into a reason to worry about Owen's stability. Vanessa's family, particularly her mother Linda, began making comments too. In family dinners, they'd ask about Owen in a way that felt more like checking on a liability than genuine concern. "How is your brother doing?" Linda would ask with that particular tone reserved for discussing someone's chronic illness. When I'd share good news about Owen, they'd exchange glances that suggested they weren't convinced his progress was real or lasting. Engagement happened after 18 months of dating, and it felt like the natural next step. Vanessa had been dropping hints for months, and her family seemed to approve of me despite their reservations about my complicated family situation, as Linda called it. Proposal was everything Vanessa had dreamed of, complete with a photographer hiding in the bushes and her friends waiting nearby to celebrate. Planning the wedding revealed more of Vanessa's true nature. She had opinions about everything and wasn't shy about expressing them. The guest list became a particular source of tension because Vanessa was concerned about how Owen would handle a large social event. "Just think it might be overwhelming for him," she'd say. "Maybe he could come to the ceremony but skip the reception. Or we could seat him somewhere quiet where he won't feel pressured to socialize." I tried to explain that Owen was actually quite social when he was feeling good, and that excluding him from parts of our wedding would be more hurtful than helpful. Vanessa would agree in principle, but then make comments about having a backup plan in case Owen had an episode during the reception. She talked about him like he was ticking time bomb rather than my brother who just happened to struggle with mental health. The breaking point came 6 months before our planned wedding date. He had been doing really well for almost a year, working full-time at the bookstore, taking classes toward his associate degree, and even dating someone new. But mental health recovery isn't linear, and sometimes even when you're doing everything right, the brain decides to remind you that it's still broken. It started with Owen missing a few days of work, which his manager at the bookstore called to tell me about since I was his emergency contact. When I went to check on him, I found him in the worst state I'd seen him in years. He hadn't been sleeping, had stopped taking his medication because he thought he didn't need it anymore, and was in the middle of what his therapist would later identify as a mixed episode, combining depression with agitation and anxiety. Owen was convinced that everyone in his life was better off without him and was making plans to disappear completely. He'd already withdrawn most of his savings and was talking about driving somewhere far away where he couldn't hurt anyone anymore. Anyone who's dealt with mental health crises knows how terrifying this kind of talk can be, especially when the person is agitated enough to actually follow through. I called Owen's therapist, Dr. Jennifer Rodriguez, who was 38 and had been working with Owen for 3 years. She recommended immediate hospitalization, at least for a few days, to get Owen stabilized on medication and ensure his safety. Problem was that Owen was refusing to go voluntarily, and getting someone committed involuntarily in Washington state requires either an immediate danger assessment or a lengthy legal process. This all happened on a Thursday evening, and Vanessa was supposed to come over for dinner and help me finalize some wedding details. When I called to explain what was happening and ask if we could reschedule, her response was immediate and cold. "Tyler, I understand that Owen is having a hard time, but we have things we need to get done," she said. "Can't you just take him to the hospital and let them handle it? I cleared my whole evening for this." I tried to explain that it wasn't that simple, that I needed to stay with Owen until we could get him the help he needed, and that this was genuinely an emergency. Vanessa's response was to sigh heavily and say, "This is exactly what I was worried about. Owen always seems to have a crisis right when we have important things to do." The accusation hit me like a punch to the stomach. "Vanessa, he's not doing this on purpose. Mental illness doesn't follow a convenient schedule." "I know that," she said, but her tone suggested she didn't really believe it. "Just think maybe it's time for Owen to learn that he can't always depend on you to drop everything and rescue him. You're enabling his dependence by always making yourself available." I spent the next 3 days coordinating Owen's care, working with his therapist to get him into a partial hospitalization program, and making sure he was stable and safe. It was exhausting, emotionally draining work that involved a lot of phone calls with insurance companies, meetings with social workers, and careful monitoring to make sure Owen was taking his medication and attending his appointments. During those 3 days, Vanessa texted me occasionally to check in, but her messages felt perfunctory rather than supportive. "Hope everything is going okay," or "let me know when things get back to normal." When I tried to explain what was happening or how Owen was doing, she'd respond with short acknowledgments that didn't invite further conversation. The worst part was that Vanessa seemed more concerned about how Owen's crisis affected our wedding planning than about Owen himself. She worried that people would think our family was unstable if word got out about Owen's hospitalization. She suggested we might want to downplay the mental health stuff when talking to her family or wedding guests. When Owen was finally stable and back at home with a new treatment plan, I tried to talk to Vanessa about how her reaction had made me feel. Explained that I needed to know my future wife would be supportive during family crises, not resentful of them. I told her that Owen was always going to be part of my life, and that meant sometimes his needs would take priority over our social plans. Vanessa's response was to frame my concerns as an attack on her character. "I can't believe you're making me the villain for having feelings about this situation," she said. "I've been incredibly patient with Owen's issues, but I have needs too. I need to know that I'm a priority in your life, not just an afterthought when your brother doesn't need you." The conversation devolved into an argument where Vanessa accused me of choosing Owen over her, and I accused her of being unsympathetic to mental illness. Both said things we regretted, but the underlying issue remained. Vanessa saw Owen as a burden and resented any time or energy I devoted to his care. 2 weeks after Owen's crisis, Vanessa suggested we take a break from wedding planning to reassess our priorities. She claimed this wasn't about Owen specifically, but about whether we were really compatible for marriage given our different approaches to family obligations. The suggestion felt like an ultimatum: choose her or choose Owen, but don't expect her to accept both. I spent a lot of time during that break thinking about what marriage to Vanessa would really look like. Would I have to hide Owen's struggles from her? Would I have to choose between supporting my brother and keeping my wife happy? She expected me to gradually distance myself from Owen to prove my commitment to our marriage. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Vanessa had never really accepted Owen as part of my life. She'd tolerated him when he was doing well, and I wasn't need much, but the moment he required significant support, she'd made it clear that she saw him as competition for my attention and loyalty. 3 weeks after our break began, Vanessa called me crying. At first, I thought she was calling to reconcile, maybe to apologize for how she'd handled Owen's crisis. Instead, she was calling because she needed support for a crisis of her own. Jessica, Vanessa's perfect younger sister with the MBA and consulting job, had been arrested for embezzlement. Apparently, Jessica had been stealing money from her previous employer for over a year, using sophisticated accounting tricks to hide the theft. The amount was substantial, over $200,000, and the company was pressing criminal charges. Vanessa was devastated. "I can't believe this is happening," she sobbed into the phone. "Jessica is going to prison, Tyler. My little sister is going to be a convicted felon. This is going to destroy our family's reputation. My parents are mortified. I don't know how we're going to get through this." I listened to Vanessa's pain and felt genuine sympathy for her family's situation. Despite everything that had happened between us, I didn't want to see her suffer. As she continued talking, asking for my emotional support and advice on how to help Jessica, something clicked into place. "Vanessa," I said quietly, "remember what you told me 3 weeks ago when Owen was in crisis?" "What?" she asked, sniffling. "You said that your family drama isn't my problem," I replied, using her exact words from Owen's crisis. "You said that I needed to let family members handle their own problems instead of always rushing to rescue them." There was silence on the other end of the phone. Then Vanessa said, "Tyler, that's completely different. This is an emergency." Is it different? I asked. Because when Owen was having a mental health crisis and talking about disappearing, you told me he needed to learn to handle things on his own. Said I was enabling him by being available during his emergency. That's not the same thing at all, Vanessa protested. Jessica didn't choose to get arrested. This isn't about mental illness or personal weakness. This is a legal situation that could destroy her future. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. So Owen's mental health crisis was his fault, and Jessica's legal crisis isn't her fault. Owen was choosing to be dependent on me, but Jessica isn't responsible for choosing to steal money. You're being cruel, Tyler. I need your support right now, not a lecture about double standards. I'm not being cruel, Vanessa. I'm being consistent. You taught me that family crises aren't my partner's responsibility. You taught me that the loving thing to do is let people handle their own consequences. You were absolutely right about that. I could hear Vanessa crying harder now. Please don't do this. I know I wasn't as supportive as I should have been during Owen's crisis, but I was scared. I didn't know how to help, and I was worried about you burning yourself out trying to fix everything. You worried about me burning out, or were you worried about Owen's problems affecting our perfect life? I asked. Because every conversation we had about Owen was about how his struggles inconvenienced you, not about how to support him or me. I'm sorry, Vanessa said. I should have been more understanding. I should have supported you better. Please don't abandon me now when I need you most. The word abandon hung in the air between us. It was the same word I'd felt but never said when Vanessa had withdrawn her support during Owen's crisis. She was right that I was abandoning her, and she was right that it hurt, but she'd abandoned me first when I'd needed her to be my partner instead of my critic. Vanessa, I'm not abandoning you, I said finally. I'm just following the relationship model you established. When your partner's family has a crisis, you express concern but maintain appropriate boundaries. You don't let their family drama become your problem. You encourage them to handle it independently so they can grow stronger. That's not what I meant, she said desperately. I was wrong to say those things. I was scared and selfish, and I handled everything badly, but I've learned from this. I can be better. Maybe you can, I agreed, but I don't think we should be together while you figure that out. I need a partner who supports me during family crises, not someone who sees my brother as competition for my attention. Conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Vanessa alternating between apologies, justifications, and pleas for another chance. She promised to go to therapy to work on her empathy, to be more supportive of Owen. But her promises felt hollow because they were motivated by her own crisis, not by genuine recognition of how she'd failed me during mine. When we finally hung up, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because I genuinely loved Vanessa and had hoped we could build a life together. Relief because I'd finally seen her true character and knew that I'd dodged a bullet by not marrying someone who would resent my family obligations. The fallout from Jessica's arrest was extensive and public. The local business journal covered the story, and Jessica's LinkedIn profile became a cautionary tale about white-collar crime. Pierce's family's perfect reputation took a significant hit, and Linda's social circle was full of whispered conversations about how such a thing could happen in such a good family. Vanessa had to navigate not only the emotional trauma of her sister's legal troubles, but also the social embarrassment of having their family problems become public knowledge. A woman who had worried about Owen's mental health affecting our family's image now had to deal with actual criminal charges in her own family. I heard through mutual friends that Vanessa had a hard time finding emotional support during Jessica's legal proceedings. Her friends, many of whom were image-conscious professionals like herself, seemed uncomfortable with the association. Family she'd always seen as perfect was revealed to be just as flawed and complicated as any other family, maybe more so. 6 months later, Jessica pleaded guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. Vanessa had to take time off work to support her parents through the sentencing hearing and help them figure out how to visit Jessica in prison. The woman who had once suggested Owen was too dependent on me was now spending every weekend driving 4 hours to visit her incarcerated sister. I ran into Vanessa at a coffee shop about a year after our breakup. She looked older, more tired, less polished than the confident woman I'd fallen in love with. When she saw me, she approached my table hesitantly. Tyler, she said, how are you? How's Owen? We're both doing well, I said honestly. Owen's been stable for 8 months now. He finished his associate degree and got promoted to assistant manager at the bookstore. That's wonderful, she said, and for the first time since I'd known her, her interest in Owen seemed genuine rather than polite. Glad he's doing better. How's Jessica? I asked. Vanessa's face fell slightly. She gets out next month. She's doing okay, all things considered. Prison was really hard for her, but she's been working with a therapist and taking responsibility for what she did. We talked for a few more minutes about safe topics, but eventually Vanessa brought up what was really on her mind. Tyler, I want you to know that I understand now why you couldn't abandon Owen during his crisis, she said. Going through this with Jessica has taught me what family loyalty really means. When someone you love is struggling, you don't get to choose whether their problems are convenient for you. Looked at this woman who had once dismissed my brother's mental health crisis as drama and saw someone who had learned hard lessons about what it meant to love someone unconditionally. I'm glad Jessica has your support, I said. Family loyalty is important, especially during the worst times. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you when Owen needed help, Vanessa said quietly. I was selfish and scared and I failed both of you. I know it's too late now, but I wanted you to know that I understand what I did wrong. Her apology felt genuine and I appreciated it, but understanding what you did wrong and being capable of doing better are two different things. Vanessa had shown her true character during Owen's crisis, and while people can change, I wasn't willing to bet my future on her transformation. You for saying that, Vanessa, I said. I hope things get easier for your family. As I watched her leave the coffee shop, I felt something close to forgiveness. Vanessa wasn't evil, she was just someone who had never been tested before Owen's crisis revealed her limitations. Her family's perfect facade had hidden the same kinds of struggles that every family faces, and when reality intruded on her carefully managed life, she hadn't known how to cope. Best revenge against someone who abandons you during a crisis isn't hurting them back, it's building a life with people who show up when things get difficult. Owen and I had grown closer through his struggles, and I'd learned to value relationships that could withstand real hardship rather than just Instagram-worthy moments. A few months after running into Vanessa, I met Dr. Rachel Kim, 31, a social worker who specialized in family crisis intervention. When I told her about Owen's history with mental illness, her response was to ask thoughtful questions about how I supported him and whether she could help in any way. I saw Owen as part of my life to be embraced, not a problem to be managed. Rachel and I have been together for 6 months now, and she's already become part of Owen's support system. When he had a minor setback last month, she was the one who suggested we all go hiking together because she'd read that nature therapy could be helpful for anxiety. Doesn't see Owen's mental health as a burden on our relationship. She sees it as an opportunity to practice the kind of unconditional love that makes families strong. Looking back, I'm grateful that Vanessa showed her true colors before we got married. A wedding is just one day, but a marriage is supposed to last through decades of crises, setbacks, and unexpected challenges. Someone who can't support you through a family emergency isn't someone who can be your partner through life's inevitable difficulties. The most important lesson I learned from Vanessa's betrayal is that love without loyalty is just infatuation. Real love means showing up when things are hard, not just when they're convenient. In seeing your partner's family as your family, and their struggles as your struggles, even when that makes life more complicated. Vanessa learned that lesson too, just too late to save our relationship. Sometimes the best education comes from losing something valuable because you didn't know how to appreciate it. I hope she carries those lessons into her future relationships and becomes the kind of partner she needed to be for me. As for Owen, he's thriving in ways that prove Vanessa wrong about his dependence on me. Having unconditional support during his worst moments didn't make him weaker. It gave him the foundation he needed to build strength. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do isn't letting someone stand on their own, but helping them learn to trust that they won't have to face their struggles alone.